Welcome to another session in the online 2021 Student Development Conference. I'm your chair for today, Mariette Harcombe, and with me are some of my fellow council members, Shireen de Bruin, Mpumi Maringo, and Suramya Bansal, all the way from India, joining us from across the big waters there. So our guest speaker for today is Leomile Mafutsanyana, and she is going to, well, no, let me not steal Shireen's thunder. Shireen is the host for today. So Shireen is going to do your full introduction. So over to you, Shireen.
Thanks, Mariette, and welcome to Leomile. So Leomile Mafutsanyana holds an honours degree in archaeology from the University of Witwatersrand. During her time at university, she was involved in the student council, as well as working as a tour guide at the Origin Center. Now in 2018, she joined SAHRA's National Inventory Unit as an intern for the Heritage Impact Assessment Extraction Project. The project was aimed at populating the inventory of the national estate through extraction of identified heritage resources in NHRAs. Later that year, she was appointed as content moderator of the South African Heritage Resources Information System, or SAHRIS. Her role in this position includes data management, project coordination, SAHRIS user interaction and monitoring, SAHRIS training and advocacy, policy implementation, content maintenance and development, as well as implementation of the National Heritage Resources Act. Leomile's talk today will focus on SAHRIS, as well as managing the National Heritage Inventory. Leomile, thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Shireen, for that introduction. And I will be sharing my screen. There we go. Is that visible?
Okay. Did you switch off your camera?
Yes.
You can keep
yes,
it on.
I can't do it simultaneously, unfortunately.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right, sorry. We'll just edit that part out.
Okay. Welcome to our presentation. This is where you're awkward with introductions. But as Shireen has introduced me, my name is Leomile Mafutsanyana. My presentation is on heritage inventories and SAHRIS. So the importance of heritage inventories is a heavily emphasized concept within the general framework of heritage management. The importance is further emphasized in international conventions and legislations, which further cascades into national legislation such as the National Heritage Resources Act. The importance lies heavily on the concept that only what is known can be protected, monitored, and planned for. Therefore, heritage inventories form the basis from which all heritage management practice follows. So the need for heritage inventories is expressed in a number of international conventions. South Africa is party to the UNESCO conventions that are listed on the screen. Therefore, with comprehensive heritage inventories, South Africa can trigger the relevant convention to protect South African heritage. For example, the objects listed within the national inventory can potentially be reclaimed should these be removed from South Africa illegally and trafficked to another country which is a signatory to the Convention on the means of prohibiting and preventing the illicit export and transfer of ownership of cultural property. And the same applies with some of the other conventions that are listed in front of you. Therefore, it becomes very important to know what forms part of your heritage, and this is in a form of an inventory. The National Heritage Resources Act, Act 25 of 1999, NHRA in short, places an emphasis on the need for an inventory of the national estate, which is all combined at national level. Each section mentioned on the screen right now speak to the management of an inventory as well as the duties of various role players in maintaining heritage data, and that is which is then reported to SAHRA. For example, Section 24(1)(f) of the NHRA requires that a PRA complete a database of heritage resources within their provinces and feed that information back to SAHRA for inclusion within the national inventory. So the diagram in front of you right now shows how this flow is supposed to work. So this flow is stipulated within the NHRA, where the Act sets up a basic framework for how the flow of heritage data is supposed to be in South Africa. So this allows communities to identify heritage, which is recorded by local authorities in heritage registers, which are then reported to PRAs and back to SAHRA. Additionally, all state-funded bodies, such as government departments, universities, museums, etc., are then required to take stock of all their heritage resources in their control and provide that data back to SAHRA. Therefore, all that information is then filtered through to SAHRA, making SAHRA the central custodian of this information. So SAHRA as a custodian needs to ensure that all the objects and places protected by the NHRA are included into the inventory. SAHRA then has to compile and maintain this inventory and has a mandate carried out. SAHRA then has to compile and maintain all of this inventory and make sure that it is publicly accessible. Now, very important and something to note is that SAHRA, this condition to have a publicly accessible inventory is not unconditional. SAHRA makes provisions for certain entries within the national estate to be withheld from the broader public. And these could be provisions that are aligned with issues around privacy to the owner or conservation issues. So having understood the emphasis of inventories in heritage legislation, it's best to understand what these heritage inventories are. As a general concept, inventories are described as ongoing records for identification and description of heritage resources, which can be used for a variety of purposes and public appreciation. David Mayers, in a paper submitted as part of a conference paper, as part of a SEPA conference in 2017, goes further to note the different kinds of inventories with which within the heritage sphere. Something to note is heritage inventories in South Africa also include places with intangible heritage. So most of our international descriptions of heritage mainly focus on objects and places, intangible places such as buildings. But in South Africa, that scope has broadened a little bit to include places with intangible heritage, such as Lake Mfunduzi. So David Mayers, a lot of so with the importance of inventories well enshrined within the legislation and within international organizations such as UNESCO and e-commerce, who have held seminars and produced papers on methods on how to produce effective or comprehensive inventories. David Mayers, in a paper that he produced for the SEPA conference, went a step further to actually go down and list out what are these tools or these factors that you need to include to produce an effective heritage inventory. And he produced a 7-point factor, and the 8th one was added by the National Inventory Unit Manager of SAHRA, noting the contribution of this one aspect on an effective inventory. So with the first one starts with accuracy, right? So a successful inventory has to be accurate, has to contain accurate data. And this is because of some of the decisions that come against this data. So for example, for demolition of a building, or sometimes it's protection, such as shown in this picture. So an incorrect data can actually have long-lasting implications on that particular site. Some of the issues that SAHRA struggles with when it comes to this aspect has to do with verification. Most PRAs are unable to roll out verification programs, therefore are reliant on old information, and in some instances, information that comes from SAHRA and SAHRA's predecessors. So that is one of the issues that we try to grapple with. And later on in the presentation, I'll show you one of the initiatives that SAHRA has put in place to try and combat this. Next one speaks to a comprehensive data. If you think of a heritage inventory at a national scale, it needs to be inclusive of all forms of heritage that lies around us, because giving priority to one sort of heritage resource or a category of a heritage resource compromises or can be detrimental to the next category of resource. And therefore, in giving presidency to actually include all kinds of heritage resources, can combat some of these issues. The problem, however, is that full comprehensiveness is not easily achievable, as some resources are not readily visible. So think of archaeological resources. Most of archaeological resources are actually discovered during development stages, and so therefore, in the moment in time, it is not known what archaeological resources may lie underneath a certain patch of land. So there's also that aspect of it to consider. But in its comprehensiveness, you also need to include its significance, its history, its association to other resources that lie within the landscape. So for example, what the picture that you see in front of you is more of a I would say a graded scale of heritage resources according to their significance within a particular landscape. The city of Cape Town has been doing this quite often, or actually not quite often, but they have used this as a tool where they have graded particular buildings according to their significance, which therefore influences their decision-making process. Which therefore brings me to a point of the inventory needs to be current. It needs to take into account things that are happening as they happen, and one of those is the legislative changes that could occur regarding that particular heritage resource. So in front of you is a snip from SAHRIS. So SAHRIS, against each and every site, place, or even objects, there is a legislative a legislative attachment to that, which outlines the changes in legislation or decision making over the years. So you will see that it went from a grading to a declaration. So and then therefore that needs to be recorded, and there's a way that it's encapsulated within that record on SAHRIS. Again, noting that South African inventory is grounded within the context of legislation which governs heritage resources, which is the NHRA. So therefore, it serves as a mechanism to determine legal protection and administration of these protections. So SAHRA uses a grading, not SAHRA, the NHRA uses a grading system for this. So therefore, when you see a site within the inventory that is graded grade 1, it means that the site is a national, well, it's regarded to have a significance for a national perspective, and therefore falls within the administration of SAHRA. Grade 2 would be the relevant provincial authority, and grade 3 means that it falls on local authority, which therefore follows the governance structure of a 3-tier governance structure that South Africa operates on a daily. So so another thing that David Myers speaks to when it comes to heritage inventories is controlled accessibility. So in noting previously that the NHRA makes provisions for control of access to certain types of heritage resources, and this is based on a number of reasons, as stipulated earlier, that this could be concerns for privacy, if the places are sacred, or also conservation concerns. So while there is that aspect of public accessibility, there are conditions of controlling accessibility to ensure that all the information that needs to be kept private is done so within reason. Heritage. So another aspect is David Myers speaks to data, right? And in order to ensure a consistent recording of resources within the inventory, the record needs to be within data standards. And this allows for the data to be captured in a consistent manner and to be integrated with other databases. So in South Africa right now, we have there is a data standard, which is in the form of SAHRIS, which I'll speak to later. But SAHRIS has encapsulated quite a few international standards to ensure that it marries well with other standards internationally, but also trying to incorporate the same standard to make sure that it cascades at a lower level. It's important to note, however, that while SAHRA can put together a standards with which the general public can follow, at PRA level, PRAs are at liberty to create their own standards on how to capture their own, not their own, but heritage resources within their respective provinces. And this one goes without saying, security, security, security. Need to, David Myers speaks in towards efforts of ensuring that your data is in a secure environment to avoid any accidental loss. Within SAHRA, there's constant backups of the inventory on a daily basis to ensure that the data is backed up, and also this includes, you know, making sure that your server environment, if it's digital, that is in a hospitable manner for the data that you carry, but also just in general the amount of data that well, the amount of data and space that was within that that environment. So you need to cater for some of these to do with the record of management actions. So decisions against heritage resources form an important part of the history of that particular resource. So therefore, having a chronological conservation of a place and changes to it, and that can occur over time, it is important that this record of changes are kept against the resource. So what you have is a little snip at the bottom is actually a snip of what the record of management action is on SAHRIS. So this particular one refers to permits that have been particular site, which is the Castle of Good Hope, and therefore you can see over time the different applications that have went against that have been submitted against this particular resource, and you are able to click on those active links to see exactly what the application process was, what the application process was, as well as the comments that came within this application process. So, having noted everything that I've spoken about in terms of heritage inventories and the principles and the importance that these tools, so to say, serve within heritage management and conservation, it brings me to SAHRIS, right, which is the South African Heritage Resources Information System, which is how South Africa at national level, which cascades down to the entire public, including all the different spheres of governance, maintain and store inventory. But the inventory with which we have, well, SAHRIS, let me say that, goes a little bit beyond inventory storage, as it also performs other management actions such as permitting, as referred to in the previous slide. So SAHRIS, it aims to facilitate some of the principles within the NHRA, which is to integrate the system of the identification, assessment, and management of heritage resources, to promote good governance at all levels. The levels referred to here refer to the local, provincial, and national level, to empower civil society to nurture and conserve their heritage resources. And this is primarily in effect of making known these heritage resources, which then form part of the heritage resources that are passed on down in future generations. And it also lays down the laws of principles in terms of heritage management throughout the Republic. And this is in the form of standards on how to put down the inventory, put down the information to capture a comprehensive and effective inventory entry, let me say that, and also enables the provinces and the local authorities to adopt powers and to protect and manage heritage resources. So a little bit more about SAHRIS. SAHRIS is an open and free open source free losing my train of thought, free and open source system for complete heritage management. It was hosted and developed on, it is currently hosted on Drupal 7 and was developed on Drupal 7, but there is works to move on to Drupal 8. And Drupal 7 basically is just a hosting platform that allows you to manage a large set of data, of content data, that is. The whole development process of SAHRIS was concluded in 2012 and publicly launched in 2013 during the fiscal year of 2013, and has And SAHRIS has 4 main functions maintained within the National Inventory Unit, which is the unit that I am employed under. And that is a link to that is a link on where to get SAHRIS, or also you can use a QR code. So the first one is that SAHRIS serves as a national site repository. And this is a database of recorded heritage sites that come from heritage registers, impact assessment surveys, information coming directly from the public as they use SAHRIS. So as SAHRIS started in 2013, it mainly contained information that was from heritage impact assessments and heritage inventories. Over the years, that has grown immensely due to various projects that SAHRA has initiated to try and understanding the national heritage landscape. As you can see now that it's close to have doubled in size in terms of what we know about the heritage sites within the country. It is also has a function of collection management, which is a free platform of capturing of objects, its descriptions, the histories, its objects, its histories, and as well as tracking the movement and valuation and condition of that particular object. This also has an integrated component to the permitting of these particular objects to govern the export as well as to govern the export of these heritage objects. It also has, it also has a National Heritage Crime database. There has been talks to actually expand this because at its current moment, it only just lists that there has been a heritage crime against a particular object. The same hasn't been done for sites, however. It was a working in progress type of heritage database so that it feeds into other databases such as the Interpol as well as the Hawks to try and have a more proactive response to heritage crime. But at the moment, it simply just lists that such crime has occurred to a particular heritage resource. One of the main things that SAHRIS is particularly used for is this integrated heritage management system. And what you see in front of you is basically a web of information that can be accessed from one particular point. And one of the main points that this is accessed from is a heritage case, which could be for either development purposes or for permitting purposes. Attached to this would be a map imprint, which shows you the footprint of that particular development or permitting. Then that from that particular case, you can link an object and you can link a site. Also from that particular case, you can also then see the different reports that are uploaded in making the case, as well as the commentary that comes from internal processing. It is shown a lot better in this screenshot over here, where on the right you have the comments that goes to show you what has been considered. You also have the permit conditions that show you what you need to adhere to. You also then see that against this heritage case, there also has been proposal for development around this particular site. So therefore, you are able to see all the heritage impact assessment reports that have been done in contribution to all of this. So SAHRA, this is one of the tools actually that is mostly used on SAHRAs, because SAHRA at some point, I think when they launched in 2013, they decided that they're going paperless. And so therefore, all the sites that are contributed to SAHRA actually, that are all the cases that come to SAHRA are actually put through this system. So now that we have the, we know a little bit more about where the inventory is kept, then we just need to understand how the inventory comes to be. So I'm just going to just quickly go through this one. So we have quite a number of projects that are running within internally within SAHRA, and one of them is a national audit project. And this is basically a project where SAHRA identifies different collections or different sites or different institutions with heritage resources to them, and SAHRA offers help to these institutions, mainly being government-funded institutions, to assist them to put together these inventories, which are then fed into which are then fed into SAHRIS and form part of the national estate. So in front of you are some of the projects, when they were done, and what is the status of those projects. Another one, which I primarily came into when I started at SAHRA, is the NHRA extraction project. And this is when noticing that with the number of heritage impact assessments that have been submitted to SAHRA, most of them have this information locked within them, which is not usable on the inventory. So therefore, then SAHRA came up with a project where they get people in to actually take out that information and put it on SAHRIS as a usable tool, therefore feeding into the national heritage estate. Then you have a provincial heritage site mapping project, which is one of the initiatives that SAHRA put together to assist provinces that are unable to verify some of their data. And part of this project has been to compare the different the various sources of information, mainly using cadastral information such as the SG diagrams, and also comparing them to the new urban details that we have right now, to see and to compare if there has been any changes within the boundaries of most of those sites. This is also just an initiative to assist PRAs that are incapacitated, especially through human resource, to verify some of this information that we have within the national inventory. Then there's also the survey digitization project. Again, it can be likened to the HIA project, where we're scanning and digitizing all of these projects, these surveys that were commissioned either by SAHRA's predecessor or by SAHRA itself, or when scholars had gone out into sites and submitted all of these surveys to SAHRA. So what SAHRA is now doing is digitizing these and then extracting them and putting them onto SAHRA's for usable data. Then we have one of the biggest projects that we carried out in 2021, which is the National Audit of Monuments and Memorials. This was part of the presidential stimulus package as to combat the unemployment caused by COVID-19. So SAHRA was then asked to put together a project, and SAHRA embarked on this nationwide audit of memorials and monuments. it has its successes and it has its own failures. We actually currently still processing the data to see from the data that we got from people that actually went out to survey the different memorials and monuments within the South African landscape, how much of that is usable, and still working through to identify exactly how many monuments and memorials do we hold on the South African heritage landscape. So with that, we kind of need to understand that it's good and well to populate the inventory and to know this inventory and to make it as comprehensive as possible. But also there's ways that we need to see the inventory come alive, and that is through using the inventory. Listed in front of you is some of the internal ways in which that, well, I mean internal, I mean how SAHRA has used the inventory that is loaded on SAHRIS. On an annual basis, since I believe 2017, SAHRA has been loading a summary and analysis of the inventory of the national estate. This is available through the homepage of SAHRA or through the publications tab of SAHRA or through SAHRIS itself on the homepage of SAHRIS. Another way that this has helped us in understanding the heritage landscape and plotting all of that information on a map of South Africa, we've been able to see opportunities and shortcomings. And one of the primary opportunities that we saw is that we have data that lies within protected areas within South Africa, which then meant that that is a great relationship that SAHRA would need to form with organizations such as SANParks to try and understand, more about those sites and where they lie. Another form that we've also been able to use the data is understand the relationship between heritage sites and development within the country. As previously mentioned, that a lot of archaeology data seems to be recorded via the development process, which is in the form of HIA, and HIA is meaning Heritage Impact Assessment, where professionals have gone out and they've actually surveyed these pieces of land and reported some of the resources that lie within these reports. So therefore, we in identifying this relationship, we were able to extract this information to make it usable. Another one, and this is where I'm going to dwell on a little bit, has to mainly do in assessing the risk and the risk on heritage resources, both natural and anthropogenic resources. So in 2019, we went on this process in trying to understand or identify, as well as knowledge that there are some risks that where risks and heritage resources as mapped out on SAHRS, where there is an overlay, and in trying to understand what and these risks are. And we produced models that related to seismic intensities, that related to flooding, that related to fault fires, as well as uncontrolled development and settlement as well. So in understanding all of this, we then saw that it is quite important to have an inventory first and identify these risks, and then from there you can then start mapping the various risks that you may encounter, which makes for a proactive management. However, we still need to note that quite a lot of work needs to be done within this interplay of risks and vulnerabilities on heritage resources. Not a lot has been is known, and therefore critical analysis of this interplay needs to actually be a comprehensive inventory, because a comprehensive inventory can actually assist when that risk becomes a reality. And in 2020, that risk became a Maluti Mountain in the park, where there was a great fire, right? But because of the restrictions of the COVID-19 pandemic, people within SAHRA couldn't, or even provincial heritage authorities could not travel, because part of what we noticed is that to manage and to protect and monitor heritage resources, there needs to be movement. People need to physically be there. But this, because of the restrictions of COVID-19, the movement had been restricted. So creative solutions needed to be put in place, right? And so SAHRA was notified way later after the fire had started that there'd actually been a fire within the park, and the fire was heading towards Game Pass shelter, which is a national heritage site. And as you may know, that the site is known for its dense rock art sites. So therefore that became a little bit alarming. And also in addition to SAHRA, within the SAHRA process, Game Pass had just been declared March of 2020, meaning that it was a national heritage site, meaning that SAHRA was responsible for this. So having noted that there is a free Sentinel satellite that can be used to actually monitor the movement of the site, the movement of the fire, and to see exactly which sites are being impacted as the fire is moving across. Then SAHRA resolved to using remote sensing and negative imagery to understand exactly what the relationship between these two occurrences were, and exactly start planning as to how they're going to move forward in terms of once the fire has settled, and what sites need to be prioritized in terms of monitoring. But all of this was only possible in already knowing which sites lie within the path of this hazard or this disaster as it was occurring. So part of that was using the normalized burn ration within the Ukahlamba Drakensberg Park to see, and using the Sentinel negative imagery to calculate using the before and after of the imageries and estimate the severity of the burn within the region, to identify which of these sites fall within these severely affected areas. And the conclusion to that came to the map that you see on the right, but also it showed that 26.3% of the 270 sites within the sample area, that being the the World Heritage Park, actually fell between the moderate to high and high burn severity. So meaning the strain was bad, but it was not as bad as expected. And that Game Pass shelter fell within the moderate to low burn severity, which is not as bad as was predicted. This, however, then meant that at some point that all of these sites would need to be monitored physically, but priority would be given to those sites that actually fell within the moderate to high burn severity. So therefore, fire is quite a major risk within heritage resources, directly and indirectly. Directly as fire burning, but indirectly in that once the water comes in to put out the fire, it can have some resources can have water damage towards that. And with the model that you see on your right, SAHRA did identify some of these places that actually lie within this red danger zone of extreme fault fires. So therefore, SAHRA began a process of setting up fire alerts for areas around and within the boundaries of declared national heritage sites using the NASA Fire Information for Resources Management System. These rapid alerts provided has already proven beneficial, and that was in the respect of the Dal Yusuf Fault cultural landscape, where it is susceptible to burning. So before the damage is, extra, then the response is a lot more rapid rather than just hearing about it a few hours or days later. So in conclusion, heritage inventories really form the backbone of heritage management, and they take into stock what heritage resources form part of the heritage landscape in the first place, and that is the first step to ensuring protection and conservation. And South Africa is a regional leader, but that is not to say we have it all figured out. There's still opportunities and critical examination that still needs to go into assessing the heritage landscape. So that is it from me. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Leomile. I think, Shireen, do you want to open the Q&A session for us?
Sure. Thanks, Mariette. And thank you, Leomile. I was particularly excited about this presentation and SAHRIS because it's such a useful tool, not only for the management of heritage from a heritage impact assessment perspective, but also I think for students doing research in their particular areas, having to look back at background, looking for background information of specific sites. There's valuable information in heritage impact assessments, particularly literature reviews, that students can access freely and make use of as grey literature, which I don't think they always remember or know about. So on that note, I'll open the floor for questions. Does anybody have a question to start us off with? Mariette, yes.
I'll go first. Leomile, because the heritage sites, the record of the heritage sites are kind of open access, they're available to the public. Is this not also a little bit risky in terms of people who...
I'm sorry to disturb, Mariette. I seem to be having quite a major delay.
Yes. I'm wondering...
I'm having quite a major delay.
If we can all turn off our videos.
Okay.
Hopefully that will help you a little bit.
Yes, they sound a lot better.
Okay, great stuff. Then it's a bandwidth issue. Sorry, so just to reiterate my question, with the record of heritage sites being, accessible to the public, does this not also, pose a risk to the sites in terms of, we have a very active amateur metal detectorist community in Southern Africa that take advantage, especially of, sites dating from the Boer War that are rich in metal artifacts and obviously are very attractive to metal detectorists. Are there any measures, perhaps in terms of education, that educate people as to why they shouldn't be just using the SAHRIS database as a means of identifying sites to go and play metal detectorists on?
Yeah. That's a very good question. I think I will break it down into parts. The first one in giving example to one of the things that the maritime unit within SAHRA is actually doing. So the maritime data, for example, is completely private from the public. So you would know that there is a site that is identified to have heritage importance. However, you will not be able to see the location of that. But that does not mean that that information is completely inaccessible. It just means that a permit, like not even a permit, but a request needs to be put into to the unit to stating what you need the data for and all of that, and then through that assessment, then they would have knowledge that there are people here and this is what they're doing. Another form that has also been taken that's also seen on SAHRIS is through the means of organic groups, which basically just means that uploading the data, keeping certain parts of it private, but also then making it accessible to a particular group of people. What this also means that you get to educate people as and when they come through for a request to access this data. Our maritime unit does a good example with this in that they have an active Facebook community that assists them in actually educating people about these particular sites or these different kinds of sites, where people would put up posts about this with a particular story and its relevance within the South African heritage landscape. So I think it's important that more of these initiatives starts rolling out for different kinds of heritage and different kinds of sites, where people can start to understand the relevance and the importance in trying to conserve and preserve and ensuring that, we don't lose these information or these sources of information within our heritage landscape. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, yes. Thank you for that, Leomile.
Cool, thank you, Mariette and Leomile. I think just for everyone, if you have a question, I see Mpumi has already read my mind. Can we please use the raise your hand reaction just to asking questions? So Mpumi, over to you, your question, please.
Thank you so much, Shireen. Leomile, thank you for your presentation. I just wanted to ask two questions, if I may. The first one kind of builds on what Mariette was saying, or your response to what Mariette was asking. Do you find any collaborations with SAHRIS and other countries? So based on, like, let's say the marine department or unit, do you find that they collaborate a little bit with Mozambique or Botswana? Because along that coastline, there was a lot of trade that was happening, and there's probably a lot of shipwrecks and historical artifacts that are associated along the oceans there. So do you find that they do any collaborations, or is it just strictly South Africa, Southern Africa, or South African heritage that they deal with?
Okay, thank you for that question, Bumi. So I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but Namibia and Kenya actually has a similar system to SAHRIS. So because of, and practically the same person that designed SAHRIS designed the system for the two different countries. So because of that premise, there is the ability to marry these two systems, as well as not marry the two systems, but marry the data that comes from these systems, because they are comparable in terms of the fields. When I mean fields, meaning that the input spaces where you can compare the data between the two of them. In terms of our wide outreach of collaboration, that hasn't really happened. There is, however, a platform that the National Inventory Unit gets to present at, which is the SEPA conference. Pardon, I forget the full name of the conference, but this is an international conference where countries that have married the digital sphere and the heritage sphere come together, and from that we've had a little bit more of exposure of international scholars, so to say, coming in and seeing some of the data that we house on SAHRIS. However, in terms of pushing through and having set collaborations outside the borders of South Africa, that hasn't been a more successful venture, but there's definitely room for that to be the case.
All right, thank you. And then just as my last question, I wanted to find out, can heritage only be included on the SAHRIS database through a formal HIA or permit process? Or could communities, for instance, add like map sites with cultural, religious, or heritage significance within their environments? So like, let's say like a sacred fountain or a spiritual rock shelter, or just a landscape that has that significance towards them.
Sure. Anyone actually can add heritage information onto SAHRIS. However, that is not always I don't want to say encourage. I mean, I'm using the wrong word there, because it's always best to work through local authorities. So usually SAHRA would encourage communities that come and like, we have this site and we want to record the site and everything. It's like, speak to your provincial authorities and they will direct you to your local authorities, and through that process, that filtering process, then you are able to have your sites recorded within a heritage register, which this heritage register is then taken within the provincial administrative sphere and gazetted, therefore making it a legal protection, make it a legally known site. And therefore that will then filter up into SAHRA. So people can actually come with information that they have identified. But the best route to work through in capturing that information would always be working with heritage authorities at local level. That way all of your data is properly captured. But yeah, and generally anyone can, if there's site and there's information, then anyone can create the site. It's not only through HIAs that these sites are discovered.
Perfect. Thank you, Leomile. I see Sarami has a question.
Yes, indeed. I was just thinking, as a student, what is the process for, having access to the SAHRIS database? So do I need to make an account and then I'll be provided with, say, a username, password from SAHRIS, so that, say, I have a honors project which I have to work on during the lockdown. If I want to do like an archival project and say comparing certain kind of sites. So is there any possibility or something like that available at the moment for students?
Yes, so SAHRIS is freely available on the internet. You can just search SAHRIS and it will take you through that. It's usually not difficult to find because it's quite, every time I search for it, it's always top search that pops up, So here's the thing about SAHRIS. So it's twofold. To create content on SAHRIS, so where you want to go into SAHRIS and actually be able to create a case, create a site, create an object, you would need to register on SAHRIS and get a username and a user account. then that way you then are able to put information onto SAHRIS. However, you can still search on SAHRIS without a username and a password. You can still search for sites, you can still search for objects, and you can still see and search for cases, or to browse around and see what kind of heritage cases are coming into SAHRA on a daily basis. So those are the two scenarios in which you can interact with SAHRIS.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Leomile. I just want to see, does anybody else have any more questions before I ask my question? Good. Okay. Cool. Leomile, I was wondering, with regards to the database created on SAHRIS, either as through, HRAs or heritage cases being reported, is there a possibility for the data to be incorporated into the Department of Environmental Affairs environmental screening tool, which, as I'm sure you know, is used in environmental impact assessments, as required by NEMA and the environmental impact assessment regulations? Would that be a possibility maybe in the future?
Yes, so there has been a few rounds of internal where the document for the heritage screening came into SAHRA, and all the different SAHRA specialists were going through it. And part of it is also the data sharing and understanding how that relationship is working or is working. Spearheaded by that entire internal process is spearheaded mainly by the APM unit, which is the archaeology, paleontology, and meteorites unit, since they are the primary units that assist with the NEMA process, which is the commenting process, where heritage authorities need to provide comment on the heritage assessment of that particular project and that whole situation. So there has been active work within SAHRA to understand the relationship and the data sharing, and to ensure that the data is shared, but particularly not to evade or to be intrusive towards the whole process, but to make it a helpful screening tool in terms of heritage data. So there definitely has been talks about that.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. So Ramya,
Sure.
can I ask your question?
Yes. So I was just wondering if you could share more about, the SAHRA internship program for students or recent graduates, because I think lots of us try to figure out for opportunities as fresh graduates, and I think you're in the best position to share how to, access such opportunities.
Yeah. That's a good question. It reminds me of how I landed my internship, if I can share that experience. My honors supervisor at the time was asking me about, if I want to carry on into masters or not. And I was like, let me just go get, on hands-on experience. And he sent me a link to the SAHRA internship program. And that's how I knew about it. So the information wasn't freely available. However, SAHRA does have or does advertise for these internship programs. One of the main internship programs that they have had, we have seen it feed quite a lot of students within, the organization, has been through KEF-CETA. So KEF-CETA I believe it's on an annual basis or sometimes on a 2-year basis, where they actually have these programs in collaboration with SAHRA, and people can be placed in various departments from the APM, the National Inventory, the Maritime or the Built Environment, burial grounds, heritage protection. So there's that one program that is running, but also on a need basis, SAHRA also advertises if a particular unit needs, more hands within a particular project that they're launching, they usually would advertise for these internship programs. So I would say that first and foremost, keep an eye out on CathSeater. Keep an eye out on SAHRA, the website itself, because usually they would have an announcement to say that we have advertised, but also one of the platforms that they use to advertise for these internship programs is through Career Junction. So every once in a while, you can go into Career Junction and just filter heritage. And usually when there is a position that is being advertised, then that is one of the ways that you can see the opportunity. But also another thing is just, keeping in touch with some peers, just to see, because usually these days people just pop a link, on a WhatsApp story or retweet on Twitter, and that is if you are well-versed or interactive on social media. That's also another way of hearing about these opportunities. But also I've also seen that the council, the Southern African student archaeology student council also puts up some of these advertisements as they come through. So there's those, within the heritage sphere, there's those avenues in which you can see an opportunity that is worthwhile. Thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you very much for all the details you shared here with us.
Sure, no problem.
Cool. I think that is all the time we have today for questions and answers. If students have questions, Leomile, I'm going to ask them to pop them on our Instagram or on our Facebook page, and we will share them with you.
Okay.
But thank you for answering our questions. I'm going to hand over to Mariette.
Thank you, Shireen. Once again, Leomile, thank you very much for your contribution to this online student development conference. To the students tuning in, remember, like Shireen said, go and post your questions on social media, but also remember to complete the pop quiz that's associated with this presentation. And then also keep your eyes out for our upcoming content. And everyone should have a very nice day. Goodbye.
Thank you.